The new starters have a lot that can be said about them, but I want to specifically talk about what their designs are based on in terms of lore and mythology and what secrets they actually hold. So let's go. We start with Sprigatito, which is a grass cat Pokemon. Now its name uses the word sprig, which is a single small plant stem with leaves on it. That's specifically where the grass typing fits in here. And Tito is from gatito or gatito, which is the Spanish word for kitten or cat. And also, Ito in Spanish means little, so basically little grass cat more or less is what we got here. But it was also discovered by Poke Sutami that shared that its Japanese name is Nyaoha, which is basically in Japanese the word nyan or nyan is essentially the noise that cats make, or the idiom or whatever you want to call it that cats kind of use there, like the same way we say meow in the West. And then happa is the word for leaf in Japanese, and then essentially what we got here is mixing those two and getting Nyaoha, which is essentially the name of this Pokemon in Japanese. As for its design, that could be deriving from the Iberian lynx, which is a species of lynx found specifically in the Iberian Peninsula, which includes Portugal and Spain, which is also what the region is based on for Scarlet and Violet. Now, the Iberian lynx is found in the southern Spain mostly, and in 2012 it was kind of restricted to a very limited area in southern Spain, which is interesting as the Iberian lynx prefers heterogeneous environments of open grassland and areas with mixed kind of shrubs and things like strawberry trees and whole oaks in its surroundings, and this makes total sense with the typing again. Now, the design also has possibly a connection to the lion seen in the Spanish coat of arms, which is interestingly also depicted as usually purple or orangish and reddish, which is kind of interesting. It also is stated by Atto over on Twitter that design could be inspired by the Egusquilore, which is a flower which is the representation of the sun in Spanish mythology of the Narvaren region, of Spain specifically. Now, the flower is also said to have been created by Amalur, the sun god of the mythology, so it is possible that the grass Pokemon could end up having a future grass and fairy evolution with this kind of in mind for its design. But that's not all for Sprigatito. It also has been discovered by Zerolin over on Twitter that the design, there also could be some sort of internalized like design within it with the initials and shape of the Santiago cross, which is the cross of Saint James and is a well-known symbol within Spain itself. There's also a few possible things we can predict for the evolution of a starter. It could also possibly evolve into sort of a Puss in Boots type of design, or possibly a fencer of sorts with a sword and whatnot, giving you kind of a bit of that Zorro vibe, so to say. There's also a possibility of it being a saber-toothed tiger, but what I personally think is most likely is going to be a dancer or model type of evolution, right? Now, usually the evolution is always based on something very specific, and we'll dive this further into in the future, as we're going to go further into what they could be all based on in terms of mythology and whatnot. But right now, the possible things are either a dancer of sorts, a fencer of sorts, or a saber-toothed tiger. We go further towards Quaxly next. Now, its name derives from the sound that ducks make, which is quack. And then you also have Exley as part of its name, and this could come from the Oxiura, which is a white-headed duck found in Spain, North Africa, as well as West and Central Asia. There's also Kuwasu, which is the Japanese name of Quaxly, and this one is a bit of an odd one, as Kuwa is the noise that ducks make within Japan, same as Nyan is kind of the noise that cats make. And then also you have the word Su, which could also be from Sui, meaning water, and essentially what we end up here is mixing those two together and getting ourselves Kuwasu, which is the name for Quaxly in Japan. As for its design, it seems to be obviously based on a duck, and in this case, there are two possible things it could be related to. Again, the Oxiura white-headed duck, which does have a strange bluish beak on it, or the Ciconia, which is a species of stork often connected to Spain and kind of Latin-related countries. Now, that's besides the point. It's more likely to be based on our friendly little duck friend in this case, which would be the Oxiura, but it does also have some odd similarities to a certain famous Donald duck, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it could possibly be connected to Donald himself, I don't really know. However, there is something much bigger to be found in its design, and this time we're talking about the top of our little duck friend Quaxly, and we're talking about the hat, which could be possibly relating and connected to multiple different things. Now, the hat it is wearing would also work as a good indication for what we could see for its evolutions going forward, and it looks very similar to a beret, sort of, which is often worn by soldiers, even, Spanish soldiers, so it could indicate sort of perhaps a military connection between Quoxley and what its evolutions might bring us. But its hat could also rather be based on the bag of ice that is often used to reduce headaches and or help with pain or trauma to the skull, which could imply a possible water or ice typing for this Pokemon. A big thank you, by the way, to Zira Lin for sharing these interesting discoveries on their Twitter account. But the hat could also be based on the seafarers such as Christopher Colombo, who would have worn a similar hat back in those days. But this one might be a bit more of a stretch, but thanks to Addo on Twitter for still sharing this idea in theory. As for what this little duck could evolve into, there is a great design breakdown by Zira Lin on Twitter that broke down Quoxley and explained what it possibly could relate to. And here is me trying to read the Spanish version of what they wrote, and you can read the English translation on the screen if you want to, but here we go. Se repiten shapes redondas, las cuales dos son las más importantes. El sombrerito que comparte color con las patas recuerda el color del cielo y del mar, con el juino a la silueta de la gaviota o a la espuma del mar. Parece un niño con una jora por la que es un diseño más cercano o a lo humano. La tercera Evo puede ser humanoide. La shape general puede ser triangular, vertical, como una persona. So there you go. That was my horrible Spanish, but hope you enjoyed it. Either way, what we learned from this is that its evolution could go in multiple directions, and it could go towards more of a seagull design, and or we might get simply a much larger duck with possibly military design to it as well. We'll have to wait and see, but the ice water typing, or water ice typing in this case, would actually work pretty well. We continue towards Fuecoco next, and this is the fire croc Pokemon. Its name derives from the Spanish word fuego, which means fire, and coco could be from coconut or just the word crocodile in this case, but it could also be more related to a Latin monster or a demon of sorts known as Coco, which is a boogeyman of sorts that is well known in Latin countries including Spain. It's often seen as sort of a manifestation of a monster that takes disobedient children away. Now its Spanish name is Hoguera, which basically the hono meaning flame in Japanese and geta being alligator, so the name mixes those two together essentially. And that's, again, thank you to Poki Sutami for this one. The design of Fuecoco, there are a lot of conflicting theories, but let's start with what we know. First and foremost, it is based on a crocodile, and this makes sense as there is a phenomena that happens with crocodiles where they release heat, or it's not really even a phenomena, it's just a general thing. They release heat through their mouths, and this is because they don't actually have sweat glands, so they end up often sleeping with their mouths open. This explains perhaps its open mouth design and why the fire typing fits well with it, being a crocodile. But that is not all. If you break down its design further, you can see that it's somewhat shaped into a little bit of a mini kaiju, but also in the shape of either a chili pepper or perhaps specifically a ghost pepper, which could connect well with the Coco connection and would make sense for a possible fire ghost type evolution if you take it in this case, right, based on a ghost pepper, which is literally got ghost in its name, and then on top of that also being based on Coco, which is a literal ghost monster creature boogeyman. So it would actually make a lot of sense for a fire ghost typing here. But that is not all. The chili design can really be seen once you break down the actual design, remove the legs and whatnot, and you can see what kind of looks like a chili or pepper look to it compared to Fuecoco. Like, you can see what it looks like here, which also is weird because it has a yellow spot on its face, and also what looks to be a stem sticking out the top of its head, making it more and more likely that it's based on a chili or a pepper. Now, some have suggested, such as Juancito Marvel on Twitter, that it could be based on the cocoa bean, which is basically what's used for production of chocolate, especially Spanish hot chocolate. But most seem to lean towards the ghost pepper design because it's like kind of the main inspiration people are assuming here. But there is a odd connection. I'm not going to lie here. There is an odd connection, and it could possibly be the cocoa plant. I mean, it even has the same name, cocoa or whatever, whatnot. So it could be that, but we'll have to wait and see. There is also a very, very odd similarity between Fuecoco and the original beta version of Gible, which have the same color scheme going for it. And thank you to True Champion Sky for letting me know of this, but what do you guys think about it? Is there a connection here? Did they reuse this design? I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions. As for what evolutions we could see with this little guy, it is hard to determine precisely, but if he truly is based on a ghost pepper or a pepper of sorts, and the naming might be coming from Coco the Boogeyman, then we could see a possible fire ghost type again. And yes, I know we just had one recently, but it could happen again for when it evolves. However, there is also a chance that it could be based on Boitata, which is a Brazilian folklore creature that is a giant fire snake, more or less. Its evolutions could also be based on the Serpent of Eden, which lost its legs after making Eve eat the forbidden fruit, which is often depicted as kind of the apple, right? Which could imply also that its design is based more on an apple than a pepper. In terms of evolutions, it could end up also then losing its legs, just like Snivy does, by the way, and turn into some form of a snake shape, which also would make sense with our giant, like, Chinese zodiac calendar, because that one says we're supposed to have, well, a snake or a bull or something, and in this case, we didn't get that with the Firestarter, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. It could still end up evolving into something of a snake design, but we'll have to wait and see if that actually does end up happening. So that was the lore and mythology we got so far for the starters. I'll see you the next time. Peace.